Hi everyone! In this lesson we will create this pill animation. In this lesson we will cement our knowledge on how to create automatic looped animation using expressions. We'll also take a look at how to animate waves in several ways, including our unique method. Let's get started. For this animation, we need to properly offset the animation of the objects so that they are well balanced. Let's start with the right rig. This time we will work with the original imported layers and prepare an illustration from scratch to show the specifics of our workflow. Let's add a reference footage to the composition for clarity and set it as a guide layer using our custom shortcut Alt-G. Move the layer below, above the background, so that it does not overlap our illustration. We will not spend time on some Photoshop layers such as shadow, small circle, and oval shape on top, and redraw them since they will not change their shape. But if you want to increase the size of the illustration by several times, then you'll need to redraw all these layers with shapes. For now, we just need to move them all to the main composition so that it's convenient to create both the rig and the animation. Let's start with the pill composition. Since the sizes of the inner compositions are the same as the outer ones, you can simply copy the layers and paste them here. But we will take a different approach. To ungroup the compositions, there's a script in the project organization section named uncomp. First, you just need to move the anchor point there, relative to which the object will rotate. That is, in the center of the small yellow circle. Next, click uncomp. The inner layers will be moved over the old composition, and if there are several of them, they will be added to the new null object, so that it is convenient to manage them. The old composition will simply be hidden. Next, we turn to the small circle. There is only one layer in this composition now, so at first just click on the same script once. There are two layers of a circle and a shadow in this composition. Move the anchor to the center of the circle and click on the script. Okay, let's rename the circle to small circle, and rename the shadow to small circle shadow. Let's parent it to a circle. Let's name the null object of this circle small circle null. Since the shadow was trimmed using a mask in the preserve underline transparency mode, let's switch this mask's mode to track matte. By the way, the alpha matte and alpha inverted matte masks are quite often used, and it is weird that there is no shortcut for them. But you can set one in keyboard shortcuts. As for me, I set Alt-A as the shortcut to alpha matte, so there are associations with alpha. Also, there are similar shortcuts Alt-S for an inverted mask and Alt-D to remove the mask. I advise you to do so too, so that in the future we will not waste time opening the list of masks and selecting the one we need, but immediately choose what we need in one click. Duplicate the small circle layer. Move above the shadow layer and then select the shadow and apply alpha matte. Also, do not forget to parent a new layer of the mask to the circle so that it does not stay in place during the movement. By the way, to optimize the sequence of these actions and better organize the layers, we also have a script for this. To better understand how layers in large projects are organized, I color code mask layers with a dark green color and add mask at the end of the layer name. There is the duplicate for mask script in the layers scripts section. It does the same thing. It duplicates, renames, changes the color of the label, and parents to the original layer. I just need to move the layer and apply the mask. This is amazingly fast, and now it's clear. Next, let's ungroup the composition with the semicircle. Let's center the anchor point and click on the script. In it, the circle has already been cut in Photoshop. Of course, such a layer cannot be rotated correctly, but we don't need that. To simulate rotation, we just need to rotate these lines. And since they will still be deformed, we do not need the exact center. We will move the layer with another null object. Add rotation to the name of this layer. Duplicate the layer and move it down over the big circle. Parent the big circle to it and rename rotation to position. and parent the null object rotation to the null object position. This way we can move all the layers and only rotate the lines. Why not just move the circle itself and rotate the line layer itself? This will decouple the animation from the object. The animation will be saved on null objects and we can quickly replace the layers with any others. Okay, let's parent some more layers. Parent the pill null layer to small circle null. And in its turn, parent small circle null itself to half ball null position. The shadow layer will also be parented to it. This way we will have everything interconnected. Finally, turn off collapse transformation of all layers so that the effects that we will add later inside these compositions do not affect the current composition. We are done with the general rig. Let's now start preparing and animating individual elements. In the last video, we looked at several ways to animate such lines, namely using the wiggle path shape modifier and the create null from path script. This time, let's take a look at another, more interesting way to create such lines. In this illustration, such lines are of the type of graphics that we don't have to redraw them, but we can generate an infinite number of them. This will help make the design more unique. You can use the scribble effect to generate these lines. By the way, we will add effects using the FX Console plugin. You have probably heard about it. And if you have not, then we advise you to install it to improve your workflow. So far, this is the best free quick effects tool. You can change the shortcut for accessing this plugin in the script settings. You can open it in the Window FX Console menu. After clicking on the gear button in the panel that appears, the settings window will open. I have set the standard shortcut Ctrl+Space. You can add the most frequently used effects to the list of quick shortcuts. Then you can call them using the keys with numbers in ascending order. For example, Ctrl+Space and the number 1. Excellent. To take advantage of the scribble effect, you need to add a mask to any layer. Let's create a shape layer with the same size as that of the composition. To do this, double-click on the rectangular shape button. Create a Y mask on this layer. Let it be round, slightly larger than the size of the circle we need. Next, add the scribble effect to the layer by typing it into the FX Console search box. This effect generates curvy lines inside the selected layer mask. To get the lines of the desired style, we need to significantly increase the stroke options. But we will avoid using extreme values to avoid bugs. Increase the curviness to 100 to make the intersection of the lines more varied, making them less parallel to each other. For example, 95. Let's make them more varied. Let's then increase the distance between the lines. You can hold down Shift so the value changes faster. Let's adjust the spacing. Let's not change path overlap too much, so that the lines do not become too smooth and remain curved. But let's increase the path overlap variation parameter to make the lines more unpredictable. Increase the stroke width by about 5 pixels to make it more like the original. It looks good. Let's not change this for now. The scribble effect has one interesting feature. Due to the specific algorithm for generating such lines, a layer with this effect cannot be expanded with the layer's rotation property. Also, changing the layer's scale will change the appearance of the line, so we will pre-compose this layer. And let's name it Texture. Let's make sure everything works. Let's parent it to half ball null rotation. Yes, the layer rotates correctly now. Let's trim it off with the semicircle mask. Let's create a semicircle mask with the duplicate for mask script. Put the texture layer below it and apply alpha matte with the custom shortcut Alt-A. Now let's add animation to this texture. There are 2 wiggle parameters responsible for the animation in this effect. So far it is too sharp, but even if we decrease the wiggle seconds parameter, you will notice that the animation is not quite what we need as it cannot be looped. Moreover, it is linear and sharp. Disable the current animation by setting wiggle seconds to 0. If you don't like the current arrangement of lines, you can change it adjusting the random seed parameter. We can animate additional stroke options and take advantage of our ability to change the shape of the lines using scale. And of course, we will use our scripts for looping animation for this. They are perfect for such background elements. Since we cannot select properties from the Effects panel, we will open the layer and the Effects group of properties in it. I want to try animating the curviness variation, path overlap, and scale properties at the same time. To do this, I will first select all of them, and then I will select Sine XY in the animation section of our scripts. It will work equally well for properties with one parameter and two parameters like scale. So let's set up some general animation. On the Sine controller layer, there are sliders that control the parameters of our looped animation on all properties. To make the animation less synchronous, increase the sine offset factor to 4. Increase the amplitude to 30. Decrease the animation speed. By setting 2, we indicate that the looped animation will run for 2 seconds instead of 1. There are a couple of problems left to solve. If you also experience the issue that part of the lines disappears, note that this is due to the scale animation. You should slightly decrease scale. Select the layer with the line, reduce the sine scale 1 amp slider by 20, type -20 in the field. You can change a few more scale parameters until you like the animation. Another problem is that the curviness and curviness variation properties are limited to the range from 0 to 100. The looped animation of the sine wave changes the value in the range from -30 to 30%. And since I set 95, 25% is lost. Just reduce it to 70. Same thing with another property, and we can reduce it to 70 or more. Go to the outer composition to make sure that all of the lines are visible within our circle. We can move the layer a little to adjust the position of the lines. The rotation happens on the parent null object, so we don't have to worry about the animation offsetting from the center of rotation. Great, we're done with the animation of the lines. In general, this tool provides a good opportunity for generative art, but unfortunately not all options look good visually. We need to work more on the style. So we used the original illustration for the animation in the video. The artist worked it out as coolly as possible. Random generative tools may not always be as experienced as a great artist. It is important to be able to combine all the possible tools. Let's start animating the wave. Let's look at the wave, which is an element of illustration. We will not consider a simple option for moving one long wave. It is certainly not bad, fast, but not always practical and nice looking. And we will cover several generative ways to recreate a wave and animate it. We've already added one of the classic ways to create shape waves to the Wave 1 composition, namely a combination of several shape modifiers to simulate the movement of the wave. We trim the path with trim paths by some amount, move it using the offset parameter, and then create the illusion of movement by moving the shapes in the opposite direction. To get only one wavy side, you can add the repeater modifier. There are enough processes to get one simple wave. With the 2020 version of After Effects, there is a new way to create waves using the wave style of the shape stroke. Let's open the composition Wave 2. This is a new set of properties for the stroke style that wavily deforms the edges of a path. In fact, only two parameters can be changed in it: the phase of the wave and the offset of this wave in time. Such waves look rather monotonous, and that's not what we want. Let's look at another, more interesting way. Another old and tried and true way to create waves is to use the wave warp effects. We'll take a closer look at it to better understand how After Effects applies effects to layers. Let's temporarily create a new composition, Wave 3. In it, create a small shape layer and add the wave warp effect to it using the FX console. Wave warp warps the boundaries and content of the layer. It will be noticeable in an illustration or a simple gradient. The more complex the content and size of the layer, the harder the processing will be. And this is its main disadvantage. As with previous methods, we generally get a rather monotonous, boring visual wave. To make it more interesting and more realistic, you can duplicate the effect several times. Then change several parameters of the wave such as width, height, and phase of the animation. This will make the wave less predictable. We can get a wave of any complexity. It will look cooler. But again, this affects the performance even more. Plus, the edges of the layer become rough after deformation, and a characteristic noticeable pixel ladder appears. Increasing the quality with the anti-aliasing property does not help much. There is a way to add variety to the wave a bit without using additional tools. One of its features is pinning to the sides of the layer, so we can get a smooth increase in the wave's amplitude. But due to the peculiarities of After Effects, if we add such an effect to the shape layer, these boundaries will be the boundaries of the current composition. We need to either increase the size of the shape layer or pre-compose it. Effects such as wave warp only recognize layer boundaries on compositions, solids, and third-party file layers. You can pre-compose it and crop its dimensions by the boundaries of the current layer with our new pre-comp script. I will cut out the effect and paste it on a new composition. Select the layer and click the pre-comp script. Let's give it back the effect. Since the effect is added to the borders of such a layer, we will not see anything. We just need to reduce the layer inside it relative to the angle of the direction of the effect. That is, now I will simply reduce the height. There are several more problems with this effect, which disturbs our work very often. The distance at which the wave amplitude attenuates cannot be changed without changing the size of such a layer, and this weakening is almost linear. This will be more noticeable if you reduce the wavelength to 1 pixel. Such a border is very noticeable in some situations. It is almost impossible to get rid of it without additional effects. In general, as you can see, it is difficult to make such a wave more original. And we created our own wave using expressions for such purposes, as it has more flexible settings. So this is an exceptionally good way to generate waves, but very limited due to its problems. We want to show you another, more flexible and faster way using expressions. Let's remove the wave from the composition. Let's open the Shape Organization section in our panel and select the Wave script. An expression-based shape wave will be inserted into the composition, and many controllers of the layer. Its main feature is that by default it combines two superimposed waves, which generate a unique wave pattern with different parameters. Let's go through its settings quickly. You can quickly change its type from fill to outline. Points number is for adding details to such a wave. The larger the number, the more points the wave will consist of, and the less noticeable straight lines will be. The problem is that many points start to slow down After Effects very much. For smoothing, you can also adjust the next slider, Round Corners, which adjusts the shape modifier of the same name in this layer. The wave will be as smooth as possible, with clear and smooth contours. The next two sliders, Ease Start and End, as well as pinning in Wave Warp, are responsible for smooth amplitude at the beginning and end of the wave, but they don't consider the boundaries of the layer or composition itself. The following amplitude sliders respectively control the amplitude of the two waves, which are superimposed on each other with different phase and animation speed. If we remove the amplitude of the second wave, we will see a classic wave. After each group of settings for two waves, there is a slider that controls two of the above parameters simultaneously. That is, it just synchronously increases the amplitude of the two waves. One of the most interesting parameters is Wave Amplitude Curve. In fact, there are not two but three waves. Another wave increases the amplitude of two waves, making the whole wave more convex or concave. I'll leave one wave visible for now to show how the other sliders work. The next group of sliders offsets the phase of the waves. In other words, changes the position of the wave, offsetting it to the left or right. The frequency changes the number of oscillations per second. You can use them to adjust the level of detail of such waves. Next, there are settings of speed and random values for fast generation of different waves. You can select parameters for an awfully long time to get an interesting wave. To save some time, we have already prepared the wave that seems to be the best for our illustration. It's in the Done folder, the path wave composition. For such a wave to correspond to the physics of the wave in the illustration and our animation, you just need to duplicate it, rotate it horizontally, and correctly match it with each other. A few simple actions that we have already prepared in the All Waves composition. And we advise you to experiment and try to make your own version of the waves. This composition can now be brought into our main illustration composition by replacing the liquid composition. You just need to add a mask. Just duplicating the oval and reducing its scale will not work as the width and height will not match correctly. So let's draw a rectangle and round its corners. It will be approximately 215 by 500 pixels in size. Let's round the corners with the roundness property to about 110. Place it above the wave layer and apply alpha matte. Do not forget to snap the layer to the first null object. Before we get into the final animation of the entire illustration, let's optimize our project a little to make the animation play faster. In two short animations, we used effects and expressions that are difficult to process. Depending on your computer, the animation will get more and more difficult to play, especially when we add such an illustration to a scene with other animations. But then we still need to add styling effects. To facilitate the processing of frames, we always have options such as reducing the resolution, which inevitably worsens the perception of the current work. Enabling adaptive resolution can also increase the playback frequency, but at the expense of quality degradation. In an even more radical case, you can lower the playback frequency in the preview panel. In the skip parameter, you can set how many frames will be skipped during playback. This can accordingly speed up the rendering by between 2 and 5 times. But this will distort the perception of the animation, which means that we can miss some details that will only be noticeable during the frame-by-frame check. These are all good practices, but they won't speed up your final render. So from now on, we will introduce you to another workflow, namely using proxy files. Another popular option is to render the composition to a lower quality video file. Insert this file instead of composition and change their visibility as appropriate. But this method has a more technical implementation. These files are called proxy files, and After Effects has built-in functionality for working with them. By pressing the Edit button on any of the composition in the project panel, you will see two items in the list as Create Proxy and Set Proxy. The proxy file can be either a video file or a simple image. Choosing Movie will add this composition with low-quality settings to render queue. The base format will be selected, which you have in the system, and which supports the alpha channel. That is, it will preserve the transparent areas of the composition that do not need to be trimmed additionally. This is AVI on Windows and QuickTime on Mac OS. After rendering, After Effects will add a proxy file to this composition. A filled white square appears to the left of the composition name. It means that a video file is now active and not a composition. When it is active, you will not see any changes in the composition. And instead of cumbersome composition with effects, After Effects will treat the layer like a regular video file, which is significantly faster. By clicking on this square, we will switch back to the original composition. Combining these two modes will significantly speed up your workflow. But such proxy files are useful for more than just speeding up animation playback. If you use the rendered video in maximum quality as a proxy, then you can use it for the final rendering. To do this, in the render settings of your final working composition, in the Proxy Use list, select Use All Proxies. Otherwise, during playback, a proxy file will be displayed and the original composition will be used during rendering. Coming back to the format of such a video, even if you are using, we highly recommend that you install the QuickTime codecs so that for rendering video with an alpha channel, you can choose QuickTime Animation codecs, or better, ProRes 4444, which, unlike AVI, have a better combination of quality and file size. For comparison, the size of picture of the same quality in AVI is almost 2 GB, whereas the ProRes 4444 codec is only 70 MB. This is much more optimal and will put less stress on your drive. To speed up the work with proxy files, we have also prepared a special script in the project organization section. To work with it, you need to meet two conditions. The first is to have the folder structure that we covered in the first lesson. You should have a project or a lesson folder in which the project should be in a folder with any name. For example, projects. And also in the root of the project folder, there should be a proxy folder. If there is no such folder, it will be created. All proxy files will be automatically located in it, so as not to manually select the location of the file each time. The second condition is the presence of the output module preset with the exact name proxy preset. It should be set to any format convenient for you that supports the alpha channel. And for the correct display of the borders of the elements in the menu color must be selected straight unmatted. You can create such a preset from the list of templates here. In the window that appears, specify the name of the new preset, proxy preset. And then use the edit button to set all the necessary settings. If everything is set correctly, then by selecting any compositions in the project panel, with one click on the proxy script, the compositions will be immediately rendered with this preset to the proxy folder. During the rendering of the proxy file, the picture may freeze. After Effects will not respond and the cursor will change to a waiting animation. It's okay, this is how After Effects behaves during such a render. You just need to wait until rendering is finished. To make sure that the process is going on, you can look at the file size as it should gradually increase. After rendering of this composition is finished, the saved proxy file will be displayed. All our work consists of a huge number of small actions, and the better we optimize them, the better it affects the entire workflow. By the way, if we apply proxy files to our previous animation of a bouncing ball, the render speed will increase many times, and can be played almost instantly. Move on to the final animation of the main layers. We will animate these layers using a looped animation script based on a sine wave. It may sound scary, but it's actually simple. Let's immediately reveal the necessary properties for animation. At the heart of such an animation, we just need to move the null object of the large circle from side to side. Rotate the texture to the correct angle in accordance with the movement. Then, with a slight offset in time, move the small circle from side to side. And with a slightly larger offset, rotate it. This kind of animation is easily automated. There are 4 properties in total. Let's select them from bottom to top. We need animation along one x-axis and rotation. So select the Sine X script in the animation section. Let's increase the amplitude of the entire animation on the sine controller layer to 30 and slow down the speed of the looped animation to 2 seconds. On the half ball null position layer, increase the amplitude by 100. The animation of rotation and position must be synchronous so that there is no sliding effect on the surface. In the half-ball null rotation layer, remove the animation offset. Change the sine rotation offset to 0. This is better. Moving on to animating the little circle. Let's increase its amplitude by increasing the sine position 1 amp slider on the small circle null layer by 30. Move the animation of the small circle and the oval above it. Let's take a look at how offset works. If set to 0, the animation will be in sync with the big circle. The animation phase is not specifically tied to speed, so that changing the speed, we do not have to readjust the displacement phase every time. The full phase lasts every integer, from 0 to 1. By setting the value to 0.5, it will move in antiphase. That is, synchronously with the main animation, but in the opposite direction. At less than 0.5, the animation will seem to be a little ahead of the main animation. And at more than 0.5, on the contrary, it will be a little late. I like the second option the most. Let's set 0.7. Let the oval unfold, being a little less than a small circle late. Let's set it to 0.5. That's all. The animation is ready. Now we can speed it up, slow it down, change the amplitude of the entire animation, and offset it very quickly to get more interesting results. We advise you not to stop there and try to make more complex and interesting animations. It is up to you whether to use expressions for this or do it manually, because the main thing is to achieve a satisfying result and have fun. In this lesson, we tried to combine new effects and animating with expressions. We also discussed how you can speed up your workflow by optimizing the work with files. Try all the tools and consider how much they can change your usual workflow. In the next video, we will touch on a more complex looped 2D animation, where simple expressions alone are indispensable. Good luck and see ya!